Welcome everybody. I'm here today with Sam Sibley. Sam's Global Head of Citizen Developer at PMI. I don't think I need to introduce Sam. A lot of you are going to know him. He's very influential within the citizen developer movement and probably is the guy driving it from the PMI level at the moment. So today we're going to be having a conversation about CD, no code, and touching on some of those sort of key topics. So yeah, thanks for your time today, Sam. Obviously, we're pre-recorded. You've got an urgent flight that you're going to have to make whilst we're talking. I think you're going to be in an airport lounge. So thank you for taking the time with us today.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's good to be connected again and working with Toca and part of your exciting journey.
Thanks, Sam. I think we should share with the audience. You and I have known each other for a number of years. And it's great that we're at different ends of the industry then working on this. Obviously myself with no code application development platform, and you're there from that governance point of view, and we're really passionate and excited about some of the stuff that PMI are doing around CD, particularly with our customers. A lot of them are asking about what CD is, what it means, how they can take advantage of that. Actually, some customers are also, whether they're coming to us about CD, they'll come into us about no code. And, we're joining those dots, joining the connections as Toca to get our customer staff trained up, because there's huge benefit in the common framework and that standardization you're doing in PMI. Obviously, we're a silver partner, we're really pleased to be part of that ecosystem. But I think if I could start with the first question for you, and we'll get the ball rolling, so to speak, is I wonder if you could take us through some of those key drivers that you're seeing across other companies and across the user, could I say the user domain of and the recipients of CD, and give our audience a bit of an overview on no code and CD.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Matt. So I think it's important to look at this in two ways, right? I think we, as a community, we're very fast to talk about the skills shortage. There is obviously a big deficit in traditional development resources around the world, and that's planned to be in place for the next 10 to 15 years. And that's driving a conversation, that's driving change. But I think if we take a step away from it just being a skills shortage and looking at, how the constant change in enterprise, in business, the constant shift in market conditions, the shift in what our customers are asking for requires a very, very new way of working. And that new way of working is really about how do we as a community embrace the ability to innovate and create value. And citizen development, the premise behind this, as we know, right? And a lot of people on here are going to be familiar. There might be some who are kind of thinking about citizen development, what is it? It's really about embracing and empowering new consumer groups to be able to drive value through innovation, right? Through innovation and application development. And what this often means is you're empowering the front line of business folks who are often closest to the problem or closest to the opportunity to be able to create that value rather than relying on third-party people in their business. And that, if you think about it for a second, is really a game changer, because it significantly opens up new doors of opportunities. But obviously with that, yes, we're making our lives easier. Yes, we're driving more value, but there is a cultural shift, right? And I think this is something that we're going to touch on a little bit here, is that there is that concept of decentralization. You decentralize control and decision making away from a centralized function that has been very traditionally in place with enterprise to a line of business citizen development opportunity and operating model, whereby these people can actually make them decisions themselves, right? And I think it really, really is a game changer when we think about that.
So if you've got, and obviously we're very pro this, but as you democratize and you push out that ability to affect change, particularly from a technology point of view, I guess we're leading into, we need to skill up people and teams. We can apply governance frameworks, but I guess I have a question of, and I had this earlier today with a customer, is how do we how do we join everything together? So you've got a team in marketing who are building a portal or a capability, an internal portal or capability. How does that system that they build, how is that governed by IT? How is that regulated by that corporation? And then do you end up with all these different fragmented systems? And so you end up with this kind of shadow IT problem. I mean, what are you seeing? How's that being tackled? And if I may, how's that being tackled across other customers from your side?
Yeah, it's a good question. And look, there's no simple answer to that. What I will say is that, and I often tie this back into the PMI canvas and the PMI maturity model that we have, which really goes through, discovery through to innovation, right? And it's a 5-stage process. The reality is, Matt, that we see a ton of organizations at that early stage of discovery and experimentation, whereby they have some people that are intrigued, they have that marketing person or that finance person that sees value, builds a very siloed application to automate a certain workflow. But if you think about it, right, what we end up having is actually quite a volatile world. From a tech perspective, right, as soon as you have a CIO, a leader in place that's actually looking at consolidation and actually looking at the enterprise architecture stack and what's going to be the go-to platforms of choice for the enterprise, if you've just focused on satisfying marketing to deliver that particular use case, you're really missing the boat. It's a highly volatile position, right? And what I describe when I speak to tech organizations is very much about a two-pronged approach, right? The first one is there's got to be pull from the business. The business there has to be pull, there has to be demand, there has to be motivation. And often the business doesn't know what they don't know. So you need to be able to educate them on the art of the possible through citizen development as the vehicle. But at the same time, there needs to be a very clear rule of engagement. There needs to be a clear blueprint around that. And that blueprint has to be sanctioned by IT. So what we're looking at here is the organizations that have truly adopted this, they've got two approaches. The first, a super motivated business workforce that understand how they can extract value, and they're all in, they want to do this. But at the same time, you've actually managed the IT group to understand how that's possible. What are the right levels of, light touch governance that are required, right, to allow the business to actually be able to develop. And that's really important because that helps provide clarity and it helps mitigate some risk. And I think we're still in this space. You talk about shadow IT, Matt, right? And I think if we're not careful, what we're going to create is we're going to create a ton of departmental siloed solutions across the globe that never fit into an enterprise architecture stack unless you're one of the big players and you've been a core part of an enterprise stack for many years in automation, RPA, whatever it is, right? So I think we have a responsibility together, the technology community, the role that we're playing in PMI, to make sure that actually for a CIO, this presents huge opportunity because you can not only control that blueprint and that role of engagement, but you actually have a huge group of people that you can outsource the development to who are going to be able to build fast, at lower cost to create value. You really lift a huge burden on IT. Right? And in return, what that gives you is it frees up huge amounts of time for IT to focus on the things that IT should be focusing on, right? Highly complex, technologically complex tasks, programs, application builds, cooperating model systems. That's not going to go away for now, right? You never know what's going to happen in the future, but for now, that's really not what we're trying to target here. That there's this new hyper agile way of working and a ton of really important use cases that citizen development and platforms like Toca can solve that are well governed and part of that rule of engagement. And our job is really to strike that balance. If we miss IT out, you're going to fall into a trap.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very, as you know, with Toca, I guess, I wonder if we have a unique position in some ways, but we're very much pro dev, pro IT. And we're definitely on a tightrope balance when it comes to CD. We're obviously pro CD in the sense that, being able to bring in, we go as far as system analysts, technical systems analysts who can use our platform. And that's kind of where we sit. I guess it's, for the audience, it's worth, my view on that is that my competition, some of these other good players in the space, we all sit on a bit of a spectrum, and that spectrum really goes from, it might be simplistic, very much domain focused tooling, It might be no code, but it's going to be quite rigid and fits within a domain. It might be for legal and it's just purely around, let's say, document, workflow around sort of document creation and processing or document understanding. And then right over to the other side of the spectrum, ultimately, you're starting to leak out of no code, go into low code and maybe higher code systems where you've got a lot of power at your hands, but you're going to need a lot of skill in your business, and you're starting to touch into the developer land. And we've already touched a bit on those skill shortages. I think where we sit and where we focus is somewhere in the middle. It's making sure that you've got the power to be able to move and deal with complex processes, but you need to be able to access that wider audience. I think I definitely see with some of my competition who focus more in the pure non-tech space within CD, there's a massive benefit there. I mean, my personal experience, previously in my career when I was in a corporate environment, if we could have built interfaces and portals for, our internal stakeholders, let's say, that would have been brilliant. And we did that. We spent tens of thousands of pounds on this stuff and, spent weeks or months building this capability, and to be able to have a platform where we could create that capability really quickly is brilliant. We're talking right now with, particularly in the UK, a big logo, a big telecoms company who they're looking to do stuff around their HR and onboarding and these kind of internal self-service applications. And I think some of the no-code tools which help you and the CD focus tools that help you go from sort of that first 5 minutes real quick, the wheels have come off a little bit on that stuff because they're starting to build bigger applications. They need more complex logic at their fingertips. And it's quite interesting because I guess it's almost like, I'm going to flip this back to you in a minute, but it's almost like all these CD and no-code platforms have all kind of got a place, but there's almost a bit of an evolution with some of them as to where you're going to get started down in the small and you're going to build, it's going to be more democratized, lower tech skills can access it, and that's all great. But then as you start to go to bigger applications that I guess get nearer to your traditional IT domain, maybe the skill level has to increase, and that's just inevitable. I'm just going to flip the question because I think what we've touched on is I call this fast business. I think it's that new era, that just capturing that moment, that sort of hyper competitive environment. And the thing that really resonated on previous conversations and panels with yourself, Sam, was your points around that culture shift to how hyper agile and continuous innovation. And I just wonder, have you got some points in your view as to how you see that at the moment? And you've kind of touched a bit on it, but I wonder if you could sort of elaborate a bit more about how you see hyper agile and continuous innovation, in the context of CD, and give the audience a bit more information on that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, look, when we talk about hyper agility, I think it's quite simple. It's in order to stay relevant, be adaptable, be resilient, which are three topics that come up in every conversation that happens right now around transformation, digital disruption. That hyper agile way of working is absolutely or can be driven through citizen development. Citizen developer is a phenomenal vehicle to address that. Yeah. It's not the only vehicle, it's one vehicle. And look, for me, I'm just going to, and I think that whole kind of work fast is important, right? We want to work fast, but at the same time, it's how many times have we seen people work fast and it hasn't been smart? They've really missed the boat on some things and it's just been killed, right? It's just dropped off a cliff because it just hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
And this is really where, like, and look, there's absolutely a place for tech organizations who are providing platforms, no code, low code platforms into the business, small use cases, subscription type revenue. There's a market for that, and there always will be. Now, as we start to evolve and we start to think about enterprise, right, and we start to think about the true enterprise opportunity, and that's really where the opportunity that is presented to large enterprise who get this right is significant. And I'm not just talking about revenue and cost savings in terms of societal benefits, in terms of shareholder value, in terms of improving the conditions and the working patterns for employees, retention, driving the right talent into the business. These are all things that come about from citizen development. So taking a step back from that, you don't want to stifle innovation because you want to drive that fast, hyper agile mentality, right? I want to do something now. Great. I can build an app and I can do this. Brilliant. New product to market faster. Excellent. But if you're going to move into the enterprise space and you're going to be providing, if enterprises are going to be driven by no code, low code technology as a core part of an enterprise architecture stack, there's a ton of work that needs to be done around going back to that rule of engagement. What is the responsibility between IT and the business? Where does that line from the business move into IT? How is that risk managed? There's another thing really important, right? Who owns the risk? If IT are going to sanction a blueprint and a way of engaging, IT are going to deliver and build the solution. Who owns that risk, right? These are things that enterprises are still trying to understand. And if I use a really basic example, right? We talk at PMI a lot about the suitability assessment and a risk matrix, right? We look at certain zones. You've got technical complexity and you've got level of risk. If something's a high risk, high technical complexity program application, right? It's not going to be a smart decision to move down a citizen developer only route. It's not going to make sense for the business. Too much risk. Why would anyone sign that off? I wouldn't. So it's really looking at that low risk, low tech complexity and that middle layer, which is that joint venture opportunity. Okay. It's the joint venture opportunity to say, look, if we're able to actually put the right governance structures in place, right? The right accountability structures in place. So we as an IT function can say, okay, we have an ideation phase, right? That someone in IT, someone from the business, any walk of life can be part of the ideation phase. And in that ideation phase, we're thinking about an idea. So we've got an idea for a no code, low code potential app, right? At that point, that app, there needs to be criteria against the app, right? Where does it fit in that matrix, suitability, risk, etc. And what that should do is that should then determine a path, okay? And that path, if it's the right fit for a citizen developer only path, should be able to go down a citizen developer path, and that should be an acceleration. So that's the fast track, fast business, right? There are a ton of use cases across enterprise that are important platforms, important apps that actually have an assisted IT process. And what that means is there's a number of gated steps and checkpoints that IT are part of. But the process is still driven alongside the business and alongside the citizen developer community. And that way, that light touch governance is really important. So, and this is something that we teach a lot at PMI. It's understand the programs of work that are suitable for citizen developer, understands the programs of work that are actually IT only and actually aren't relevant for citizen developer at all, and understand the middle ground. And if you can start doing that for tech organizations like you guys at Toca, for enterprises who are looking at mobilizing a COE or even just getting started and thinking about, what are some of the first types of apps that we can do to create value? This is how we should be thinking about it. We should be thinking about small things to start with, but at the same time, what's this going to look like in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months from now into the enterprise? How is it going to be a core part of our enterprise architecture?
I've written a few notes down, just say that I think the thing that from listening to you there, I think I need to call something out and say what it feels like, and definitely across my customers, is we're definitely on a journey. We've got some new tech, we've got some new driving factors, and with fast business, we've got new technology, we've got cloud focused businesses, we've got new starters and new entrants into the market who can disrupt some of those legacy players, right? So everything's kind of accelerating. And it's not that long ago that we would have had all of our old IT processes. Look, most businesses will have properly digitized in the last 20 years. I'm old enough to know the late 90s, and I remember certain firms, you know, coming online properly with email and things like that. So a lot of this is still quite new. And those businesses have probably gone through their first major waves of digital transformation, bringing in big system of records. You know, you've got the likes of Oracle and SAP with the larger organizations, that type of stuff, that initial digitization. And not actually bringing in email. I mean, we forget that, what, 22, 24 years or whatever, it'll be different depending on people, on our audience. But a lot of this is quite new. And that has come with it. We've defined processes, ITIL. In the UK, we've got things like SIAM. We've got different frameworks that define different areas, those businesses, those formalized frameworks, and they're all brilliant. They're all good. And actually, a lot of that's going to continue. Those processes will continue. But getting to my point, long way, is I wonder how much of, when we look at how we bring CD and we bring in the utilization of no-code tools into businesses today, I wonder if we're comfortable and if we really know the answer as to how we need to change our businesses right now, because we're all on a journey. And I think that's the thing I need I feel like I need to call out, is that organizations have to go on a journey. Some of I think what you've painted in that, you know, that kind of future state, how CD can work in harmony with IT is actually a great framework for the future. That might be one outcome for how businesses can seamlessly work together with these technologies so that it becomes business as usual. Because at the moment, this is all new stuff. And I mean, some of our customers, they're doing massive things, but it still centers, it still comes out of IT. And so it carries with it those traditional processes already and those traditional processes of governance. So it's really delivered like a fast IT project. That's how our customers are consuming our tech. We are starting to see those early signs of that wider democratization where different departments can come in. But at the moment, a lot of our customers are just, I guess they've got the plates full with their backlog. They've got to tick through, you know, those IT challenges that I guess those challenges that are placed on them as an IT team within a large organization. But I think I think this goes back to the beginning, where this is where we align with the PMI. Somebody's got to be setting out this framework, but I do think it's going to evolve, and I think we've all just got to acknowledge that. And at some point in the next couple of years, I think we'll start to see this stuff settle down. And I don't know, what's your view? Do you agree with that, or that too challenging for?
No, I do. I do, and I do, and I don't at the same time. I think that, you know, it's the important part here is that as a technology organization, to be able to walk directly into a large organization, large enterprise organization, knock on the door of IT and say, I've got a technology that you guys are going to be able to use, it's not going to happen, right? Companies are so risk averse. Technology is always evolving. Everyone's trying to sell people everything. Every technology under the sun is in, you know, it's hard. It's hard, right? And it's not just hard to sell it as a platform. It's hard because a lot of these organizations are under significant pressure to consolidate the platforms they've got. I mean, you've seen this when you've been in your, you know, previous corporate worlds, and you've been on buy side, Matt, right? And you've seen this where you've had people come to you and try to provide platforms to you, and you've had to be thinking about the long-term vision of how are we going to consolidate onto one or two or three platforms of choice that are going to be able to be fit for the future for the organization. So it's really important for CD, right? Let's link this back to what we've been speaking about: fast business, hyper agility, speed. That's the commonality there, right? It's all about speed of change. So if you're going to be putting in place too many barriers for organizations to adopt this, you actually move away from a hyper agile, fast-paced environment. The revolution just doesn't make sense, right? So it's all about you need to lower the barriers to adoption and drive an adoption plan where you might start with a business. And it may be that you start with a business who have a particular problem they want to solve, create value, use those business stakeholders, those citizen developers, to build a very strong quantifiable business case, right? Make sure that you know, and I'm not just talking about Toca, I'm talking about in general, have a very, very clear plan around all the things that you know IT are going to be concerned about, right? Is the technology enterprise proof? Are you going to meet compliance? Are you going to meet data? Are you going to meet secure? Like, there's all these things that you know are going to come up as part of any due diligence exercise of IT. So predict that, right? Technologies that are enterprise ready and are actually, this isn't a game, right? If you've got technology that businesses are going to be able to use and embrace, and you're just not speaking to the right people and people don't know what they don't know, then start with something small, prove the value, predict what's going to happen in the future, and leverage that, right? And I think, look, the key thing here, Matt, is that everyone talks about the, you know, typical consultants language, people, process, tech, everywhere we go. But let's just think about that for a second, right? Technology, like Toca, is more accessible than ever, right? The platforms are smarter than ever before, okay? This is why we have seen the rise of the citizen developer, because the complexity has moved away from people to platform. So technology is there. The challenge with technology is making the right choice on which platforms are fit for purpose for the project that we've got. Not, I'm going to use this platform because it's already in the business and we've already got the license and we're just going to go for it because it's a big name, right? It's what's the right technology for the right thing in front of us. But away from tech, it's people and process. People and process around the culture. This has got to come from the top, right? The top have to embrace this. They have to embrace the decentralization, right? It's about the right operating model that needs to be in place, right, for this to survive. And it's really that shift in mindset, right? Because if you think about it as an organization, right, if like IT, it's a tough game for IT because they've got tight budgets, never any more resource. The business are getting far more demanding because the customers are getting far more demanding. So the level of apps that are being required are like, I don't know what the rates are, but it's like 200% increase over the last couple of years of development requirements, yeah. Right? So what's going to happen? IT are going to say one thing, and that one thing is no, we can't do it. We can't do it, Matt. We can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. Where do we get? That's not going to get us anywhere. How's that going to take us to a hyper agile world? Because
yeah, absolutely,
it's not.
I know, and I mean, this is where I think a part of this journey. This is where IT needs to. I do believe IT needs to be in control of this stuff, because if we take it out of IT and we push it out purely uncoordinated, ungoverned, and that's not what you're saying, and that's not what you're seeing in the future. But if we did that, what would happen is we'd end up with a load of different capabilities within a business, and eventually someone will come in, someone analogous to a CIO maybe, or a CTO, depending on the organization, and go, we need to standardize the way of working. And there'll be all of those, what we used to, you know, lean and processes like that will come in. And ultimately you'll end up back at square one with an IT team. Yeah. I actually think, you know, IT need to be in the driving seat on this stuff now. Now, if you can utilize people within teams around the business, that's great, because that's just helping you get through your backlog. And ultimately that's what we're seeing. We're very pro dev. We train up devs, we train up systems analysts for our stuff, and they can just crack through their backlog really quickly. All of those things that needed to be done yesterday, that's what they're getting on top of. So I agree. I'm going to move on to, you know, a couple of last questions ultimately for the conversation. And I think this one's definitely selfish for me. We're doing some live marketing strategy in front of everybody, and let's do it. But, you know, I'll do it in the right way. How do customers start with this technology? So we've got a load of people here today. Their question is going to be, right, this is great, CDs, a load of vibrancy around it. We can see what's coming out of the PMI, heard about no code. Yeah, you're telling me that we can do stuff 20, 30 times quicker. Well, you know, that's fantastic. But if we go to a customer and say, do you want a no-code application development platform? What I'm actually saying is, have you got any problems? And that's it. And do you want to buy a solution to problems? And no one buys a solution to problems. People buy a capability to accelerate, you know, X area within their business or digitize these journeys within their organization. So my questions I wrote down is, how do our customers, how does people within our audience start today? How do they get a footing into this world and start getting that education and moving forward? And then I pair that closely with, what advice have you got to Toca? And also there'll be other suppliers on the call today. Now, how do we sell this to our customers? How do we align those two worlds? We've got a capability. Our customers are wondering how to start. You got any views on how we reconcile those two bases? You've touched on it a little bit already.
Okay, so let me take the first question. So where to get started? So look, I think we're in a very fortunate position right now where there is a lot of information that's accessible. Okay, I'm not just talking about PMI here. There's a lot of information. The barriers to adoption are so low now that you can spin up a solution today, tomorrow, and have the right training in place for pretty low cost or free to get up to speed. So the accessibility isn't a problem, right? The accessibility is not a problem. The challenge for everyone on this call is that just building cool applications doesn't take you to a level of scale and a level of innovation that we talk about, you know, this hyper agile, you know, cool apps are great. It's what happens next. And I would recommend for everyone on this call, right, is that you want to start small, but understand the bigger picture is really important. How do you use the concept of citizen developer and the accessible technology available, the powerful technology available to you today, to be able to solve a problem that improves your work, that improves your delivery, that improves the output and the value that you create to people in the organization, and use that as your entry point, right? The market is all a land and expand market. No one is going in and providing a big organization with a very, very big deployment of a no-code app solution, apart from some of the big players that have been in the space for a long time. And that's just because there's an MSA in place, and that's because, you know, you don't get fired for hiring IBM type thing, right? Now, the reality is the vendors in the market are doing very, very well. It's a land and expand model. It's land, find the sponsors, i.e. people on this call who actually want to find value early on and solve a problem, combine that to create this business case or this shift in mindset that is like, actually, you know, we've got something powerful here. And actually, do you know what? IT probably want to be listening to this. Let's work with IT. Because then what you find is that's often your line of business stakeholders that embrace a free trial on Toca, or might take the foundation course from PMI or the practitioner course from PMI and want to move forward and want to take their careers forward, actually end up being your evangelists that actually do that integration with IT work for you, right? Because the value for them to become champions and really drive this movement is really, really going to be down to these line of business folks, right? And I want to give you one example, right, Matt? And I know I'm going off the topic a little bit, and I haven't answered your second question yet, but I talk about, and I used this analogy a little bit recently, actually, around Amtrak. Amtrak, you know, transportation company in the US. Michael McCullough is the guy leading the citizen developer journey there, and I'm sure he won't mind me sharing this. But they've been on a really important journey, right? So Michael was like a lot of the people that are going to be on this audience, right? A lot of people listening today, where had an idea, starting dabbling in some technology, was very much in the line of business, was moved across to IT, to really run some programs and to build a citizen developer capability. But the business weren't sure on the direction. Where is it going to go? IT were like, oh, I'm not sure about this, right? But go and make it work, Michael, right? And what he's created, and starting from 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 apps that he built as a citizen developer himself, right? They now have hundreds of citizen developers in their business creating huge amounts of value to the wider organization, both in terms of IT, pro dev, but also citizen developers. And the reason why I tell you that story is because it's possible. And it's possible if you think about the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is how am I going to be an evangelist to take a cool idea as a practitioner on Toca, for example, and actually be the person that's going to be thinking about the culture, the mindset, how am I going to educate the leadership team on this drive, right? That's on this audience, your differentiator and your career trajectory, right? So that, otherwise what you end up doing is you end up building apps that are nice to have, that make your life slightly easier, but aren't going to actually deliver the huge amounts of value that you want them to deliver, or you think they're able to deliver, right? First thing, right? And I know it's a very high level answer. That's the first thing. So your question around how companies can sell, I mean, it's a hard question. It is a hard question, but I think it ties back to the land and expand, right? Try and solve problems fast, right? You want to encourage innovation. You want to encourage hyper agility. You don't want to stifle innovation and only focus on spending a year to sell to IT that Toca is going to be the enterprise, no code development platform of choice, because you're just going to kill yourselves, right? And you're going to run out of time. So it's about, you need to make sure that you're doing everything that you need to make IT feel very comfortable that your platform is secure and it's not going to do any harm to the business. You need to do enough to say, actually, our technology is smart enough, sexy enough, easy to use enough for a business person to go, I get it. This is cool. I can start building something tomorrow and it's going to help me and it's going to drive value, right? And if you do both of those things, you end up reaching this kind of summit. And often that summit could take a month, it could take a year. But it's where the business application development continues and you start solving some use cases. That's the land. But the other pronged approach is where you've actually, you've answered the questions and you've predicted the questions that IT are going to come up against, right? Or going to come up with. And you meet in the middle. And the middle is where you have your champions that often are in the business that bring the two worlds together to say, do you know what? We're delivering enough value through Toca or through the other technology platform that justifies us being a bit smarter in how we use this technology.
Yeah.
That is the key to success here.
I couldn't agree more. And I will add, going back to the first question, on how customers start, I'm not going to obviously add into, the advice that you've given to us and other suppliers on the call, because that's fantastic. And maybe I should have asked you that offline, actually, thinking about it in hindsight. But,
yeah.
But in terms of our customers, we're talking with IT. IT are already talking with the line of business and working out what those problems are. We're definitely getting involved in high volume areas. So where there's a pain, there's already a big problem that they need to fix. There's automatically that ROI. But I do think, for everybody on the call is starting to think, if you are line of business, I think you need to be connecting with IT. You need to be vocal around what your problem is. And I think vice versa, if you're IT, well, you're probably going to be under the cosh. Your backlog's going to be full with line of business, but find time to actually work out really what is all that untapped demand in the business. Get it visual first, and then start to think, well, how can we solve it? It's going to be painful in a sense, because what you're doing is you're saying, well, I'm overworked. Where can I go and find more work? But just hold on. If you can say, well, actually, this is a backlog. We're on the back foot with our backlog at the moment. What is it that the business is wanting to do? Just take it up a level without being too patronizing for, our community. Obviously are skilled and understand this stuff inside now, but to go up a level to say, well, but what is everything else that we're not hearing about? And then start to map that into technologies and start to, if you're on this call today, you've got an interest in no code already, you've got an interest in system developer. So you're already one step ahead in that curve, and look at how these technologies can fit. I definitely agree with you very much, which is, don't just take the license that you've already got that's sat on your desk, because would you do that with any other IT piece of software? No, you're not. You're going to think about, what platform is going to solve your problem. Very last question, because we're at time. And it's a cliche question, but let's do it. And I'm going to ask what the next decade looks like. And it might be 2020 onwards, but we're in this decade. I'm obsessed with decades. I'm 41, and I remember how quickly mobile phones and the internet appeared, and we, and our life transformed. And, when the iPhone came out in 07, I didn't used to sit staring at my phone in my spare time. Now, I sit staring at my phone in my spare time, bit of an admission there. So I think I'm obsessed with decades and how they capture change and the great sample. But you talked about CD being this big movement, and that's what I believe. You've talked a bit about how IT needs to work and how we can evolve these processes and make CD business as usual. I just wonder, what does the next decade look like in terms of business, and that could be the outside of the business, it could be the inside. And I don't need to rattle you. I mean, it's a big question, right? But what's your view on it, Sam?
Yeah. So I think hard to know about a decade. And if we think about
big,
and look, like, this, Matt, right? I've worked with you for a while now. I've spent a lot of my career in the world of data, the world of analytics, the world of AI. Like, think about how much that world has changed in 10 years, right? 10 years ago, we wouldn't, it would have been unheard of. Who would have predicted where we are right now with artificial intelligence, machine learning, some of the platforms that existed? Like, it's so sophisticated. The work that data scientists are doing, it's incredible. I mean, it's literally mind blowing. Some of the stuff that is going on with big organizations, stuff that NASA are doing around. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. It's eye opening, right? So we're onto something similar, right? I think that there is a lot of similarities between data and citizen development and application development and no code and low code, because at the end of the day, a lot of this is very much powered by data. It's powered by the quality of data. If the data's right, you're likely, you've got a better chance of getting the right output that's going to help you advance something or change something positively. If the data's rubbish, you're going to have a rubbish output, right? That whole cliche about the data pipeline. So linking it back to this, 10 years time, 5 years time, the enterprise space, and I know we focus a lot about enterprise here, right? But this is the same, for SMEs, and citizen developer is highly relevant for startups and sole entrepreneurs, and it really is an inclusive world. But we're touching on enterprise for now. The way that enterprises work, and this has been heavily affected by what we've been going through with the pandemic and the change to hybrid models and remote working, and the way in which we interact. Citizen development is only bringing teams and business units closer. If teams and business units are going to be closer, and you're going to streamline knowledge, you're going to bring assets in your business closer together to solve problems together, right? That collaboration and that kind of that empowerment is going to be a game changer for the way in which businesses run. Now, I believe that we're although no code and low code has been around for some time, the accessibility of it hasn't been there, right? It's the accessibility that's changed. I think that we're going to see a future state where entire organizations are going to be run on no code and low code application development platforms. I think there's going to be a time where we're going to see migration off legacy infrastructure onto no code, low code. And the time that will come at a time when the topics, the hard topics, remember, it's not hard to automate a workflow, right? The hard topics around getting the governance right? Getting the risks, the accountability, the operating model, getting that right. So the business and the leadership feel comfortable to migrate off extremely expensive, clunky systems that have been in the business for 20 years, right? Is going to be a tipping point for this industry. And that's going to come. I think we're a couple of years away from that. So that's the first thing. I think that the second thing that we're going to see, Matt, is I think we're going to see a lot of digital first challenger organizations, whether that's in banking, insurance, digitally savvy, young entrepreneurs who are really coming at this from a different angle, who actually already run a lot of their businesses on no code because they don't come from that same risk averse mindset, right? We're already seeing them run on low code. And I think we're going to continue to see digital first organizations run on low code platforms. And I think, look, we're going to see the concept of a citizen. We have a citizen developer. We hear about the topic of citizen data scientist, citizen project manager, citizen check. Like any line of business that typically has required expertise, right? Domain expertise, with the right technology where you remove the complexity to the platform, you open up a citizen world. And that citizen world is all about streamlining and bringing people together, right? And I would argue, for what we've all gone through, what an amazing world. What an amazing world where we're working together and not against each other. Why should a business not work together in two very important functions of line of business and IT? Work together, work in harmony. It's a joint venture. Joint ventures win.
We'd just like to say, thank you very much for everybody's time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.